If you want to know what the most gruesome gym injury I've ever witnessed with my own eyes in the gym, stay tuned. I created Species Nutrition with one mission in mind: to provide bodybuilders and serious athletes with no-nonsense supplements that work. I put my name and reputation on every bottle of Species Nutrition products. If you want to be your absolute best, join the evolution.
RS Television, RxMuscle.com. This is Ask Dave, your weekly question and answer show with Dave Palumbo. I'm your host, Sadiq Faruqi. Thank you for joining us on this 21st day of January. This is your forum to ask Dave whatever's on your mind, be it bodybuilding, non-bodybuilding, diet, training, supplementation, life. Of course, the IFBB Pro schedule kicks off with the Arnold Classic in just a matter of 6 weeks. Whatever's on your mind, this is your forum. We go right into the questions. The first two questions on the show from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. I'm currently doing the low-carb protocol. I don't know if you meant to say, I guess, your low-carb protocol. Wondering about training tips while eating low-carb. My workouts are feeling a little bit flat. I generally train hour, 15 minutes, 5 times a week. Should I lower the weight and do more sets? I'm losing weight and realize this will affect muscle strength and endurance.
Well, whenever you diet, you're going to lose, you're going to lose some strength in the gym, and because you don't have as much volume in your body, and you're actually, to be honest with you, even when you're fatter, the heavier you are, usually the stronger you are. What I think most people notice is when they first start the diet, they actually get stronger because they lose a lot of that excess water weight that sometimes can be maybe inhibiting their flexibility. But then ultimately, as they get super lean, they get a little weaker. If you're on a low carb diet or my keto diet, they're pretty much comparable. The same thing happens. Low glycogen in the muscle, less fluid in the muscle. Because remember, when carbs are stored as glycogen inside the muscle cells, they store fluid with them, water, and that gives you a better pump. When you're depleted, even if you're not on a ketogenic diet, if you're on low carbs, which most people have to do to lose body fat, you're going to have low glycogen stores. You're going to have less of a pump. You're going to have less strength in the gym because of that. You might also have less endurance because you have less, whether you're on a ketogenic diet or not, even on keto, you're going to use glycogen as a fuel source in the gym only. Now, you might only use 30 grams, in the gym of carbs, and your muscles always have at least, that plus a little bit more in there. But what happens is you cannot train as long. So what I recommend people do is keep their workouts at an hour max. If you have to reduce the volume of what you're doing, that's really what I recommend. I wouldn't reduce the weight unless you just can't lift as heavy. But if you do less volume, a little more rest between sets, which is what you should do anyway for resistance training, what you'll find is that your strength doesn't go down quite as much because you're getting more rest and recovery, and you're not exhausting yourself as much. And therefore, your body needs less glycogen because you're not training as long with as many sets, and you'll tend to get through the workouts better. And what you'll probably find is that when you're done with this whole diet program, and you go back to off season again and trying to grow, you'll find that the less volume and the more rest between sets actually works better even in a growth scenario. So a lot of people learn how to train properly when they're doing contest prep because they actually have to reduce volume, and they realize, hey, it actually works better. I can lift heavier. I get more rest between sets. I don't have to rush as much. And you know what? I'm actually growing better. So it's a double-edged sword that can work to your advantage if you take advantage of it. Can't hear you, Sid.
And of course, I muted myself again. Bear with me. I'm kind of fighting the flu right now, so a lot of coughing going on in the background. Hence, why I'm probably going to be muting myself a lot during the course of this episode. But anyway, second question. Again, these first two from the Dave Palumbo Experience app. Your thoughts on bodybuilders becoming insulin insensitive in the offseason? I've noticed a trend recently of many coaches preaching the importance of staying insulin sensitive in the offseason, such as by staying lean as possible, doing cardio, etc. I've heard you say in videos that lifting in the gym makes you insulin sensitive already. So what are the chances of becoming insensitive when pushing the food up?
Yeah. Yeah, I've said this a lot. I'm going to continue repeating it because I think there's a lot of bad information out there. Weight training, as well as cardio, increases insulin sensitivity. So you don't have to do cardio to become more insulin sensitive. Exercise in general makes you insulin sensitive. And what that means is that we all have a certain number of insulin receptors on our cells. But when we train, the body has an ability to absorb glucose, okay, without the need for insulin receptors. In other words, and without the need for insulin. So exercise itself pushes glucose into the muscles and lowers blood sugar. So exercise itself is an actual glucose lowering or blood sugar control type of activity, which is good. That's why when you actually, what's his name wrote that, the 3-Hour Body. He actually quoted me a few times. I can't remember his name right now. I just want to get a brain fart. But he suggested, what if everyone, after every meal, you did a little bit of like exercise, you did like 20 push-ups, or you did some air squats. Would that increase insulin sensitivity, or at least help drive some of those nutrients you just ate into the muscles? And he found that his blood sugar control was better. Now, it's obvious that's a little neurotic, but the actives make you more insulin sensitive and allows you to absorb glucose better by, number one, helping the insulin receptors numbers go up, but also by driving food directly into the muscles. So we know that people who work out tend to be much more insulin sensitive than the average person. So when we see higher blood sugars in bodybuilders, it's very, very infrequently due to insulin sensitivity problem, unless you're taking massive amounts of GH, because GH kind of antagonizes or works opposite of the insulin receptor, right? It blocks insulin from getting to its receptor. But assuming you're not doing that and you're taking moderate amounts, like 2 to 4 IUs, or you're not using any at all, you shouldn't really be insulin resistant at all. And the reason a lot of us are, or have trouble maybe controlling blood sugars perfectly, is because we're eating a massive amount of food. And when you eat a massive amount of food, which includes a massive amount of carbs, and protein can convert to carbs, we know that as well, sometimes your body just can't handle that load, especially as we get older. So when we get over 40 and we get into the 50s and 60s, all of a sudden we our blood sugar fasting in the morning is high. Maybe some people are having meal sugars, postprandial sugars that are high, because they just can't handle the capacity of the food we're eating. And that's not an insulin sensitivity problem. That's an insulin problem. There's just not enough insulin. And so those situations, I always recommend, at least especially when the fastings go up, a long-acting insulin to solve that problem. Now, these coaches out there will tell you that's not the answer. You got to take 40 different insulin sensitizers. You got to take berberine and this thing and that thing, and they'll put you on a GLP-1 agonist, just to increase, because that drives blood sugars down a little bit. You don't need to do that. The problem is not an insulin sensitivity problem. It's just an insulin volume problem. You cannot produce enough insulin. Now, there are people that have legitimate insulin sensitivity problems. There's no doubt about that. Also, if you take 8 IUs, 10 IUs of GH a day, and it's antagonizing the insulin receptor, you can override that effect, but not with insulin sensitizers. You can use more insulin. And that's why guys who take a lot of GH take insulin with it a lot of times, because they find they can't grow without it. So these are, situations. And once again, everyone is a different scenario. So I'm generalizing, but in general, the best way to, combat a blood sugar, height or an elevation in blood sugar would be to figure out what the problem is. Now, taking like my Species Nutrition's Omega-lyze, which is an essential fatty acid supplement, those are really good insulin sensitizers. Those fish oil, evening primrose oil, those really help insulin receptors work better. We don't know if they actually increase the numbers, but they make them work better. And probably because they have anti-inflammatory effects on the cells. But so I would certainly assess what you're doing. If you're noticing the sugar control is bad or is worse, is better. My father's going to shoot me. Is worse in the off season, then there's your answer. You're eating an enormous amount of food. Your body can't handle the capacity. If when you're dieting, it's perfect, then there's your answer too, because you're not eating as much carbs. So obviously your body can handle it. It's usually in bodybuilders an insulin production problem, not an insulin sensitivity problem.
Before we go to the rest of our questions, Dave, our friends at Titan Medical Center have, again, we talk about the different peptide protocols that they have, the different peptides that they have to offer. And then they have very unique offerings where they have combinations of them. So one is called Glow, which is their active special for this week. All-in-one peptide protocol combining BPC 157, TB 500, KPV, GHKCU, inflammation balance, tissue repair recovery, hair, skin, and nail integrity, and anti-aging glow at Titan Medical.
Yeah, Glow is a great combination. And I kind of was asking John and Charisse over there to put a formula like this together because it's, you know what, everyone wants to take all the healing peptides, right? And everyone doesn't want to buy, 4 separate bottles where they have to take 4 separate injections. So if you can put it all in one bottle, it just makes it easier. I don't always use the Glow. They send me both the Glow and the BPC. On a regular basis, I use BPC almost every day, just because I always have some body part that's hurt, right? And it's just good for healing. Usually once a week, I'll do the Glow, which is the combination of everything. And I kind of just feel like, it's a nice little boost once a week I can get from that. And then on a regular basis, I use the BPC. That's just how I do it. But they're put the Glow on sale, so it's at a much reduced rate. I would take advantage of that because once again, you're getting all the healing peptides: the BPC, the TB 500, the KPV, and then the copper peptide. So they all work really well. Larry from After Hours, Larry Pollock loves, he has like really bad colitis, and he says that KPV is a great anti-inflammatory peptide. It really helps his gut tremendously. So if you do have gut issues, you might want to try this just for that alone. I don't have any gut issues, but I want to heal at maximum rate. And I find that, when I take these healing peptides, I definitely recover better from my workouts. I don't use growth hormone. Obviously I had my thyroid removed, I had thyroid cancer. I just won't use it. So for me, those healing peptides work really, really effectively. And they're readily available by prescription from a real compounding pharmacy. And obviously, I trust Titan Medical Center, and they do a great job. And they're very helpful if you have a lot of questions. So make sure when you contact them, tell them RxMuscle and Dave Palumbo sent you for that great discount.
And before actually we go to the rest of the questions, I did want to make somewhat of an announcement. We are working on a brand new RxMuscle.com. Now, for those of you who have been with us for the better 15, 20 years, you remember back in the day when this was a website-based operation before, obviously, we took everything to YouTube. And this is obviously YouTube is our primary base of operations. But we do have, it's in the works right now. We are actively building the new website, and it's going to be much more user-friendly experience, advertiser-friendly experience. So, it's going to allow us to cover bodybuilding and everything around it in a much more broader perspective beyond what we're able to do on YouTube. So, it's going to be a lot more, feature articles, a lot more, obviously newsy pieces or whatever that, again, it's just not really meant for Dave doing a reaction video on YouTube or what have you, but it's going to be a much more modern experience, a much more user-friendly experience. So I wanted to get that out there because I know people have been checking RxMuscle.com and either it's not coming up for them or they're seeing something from days, weeks ago. So I did want to put it out there. That we are building a new website, and we anticipate that it's going to be live within the next, aggressively, I would say, in the next couple of weeks.
It's funny. I don't think anyone else has the problem that we have because we've been around since 2009. So the website is ostensibly like 16 years old. And, while it still functionally works, it's a 16-year-old website. Most of these, most websites out there are like a year or two old, and the people are just coming out. So we've been around probably the longest of anyone at this point as far as bodybuilding media websites go. So it's time for a little, refresher, so to speak, and that's what we're doing. And I want to just thank everyone also about the Dave Palumbo Experience app questions. The questions are phenomenal. They keep coming in. If you want to join the Dave Palumbo Experience app, it's $29 a month. You can download it from your iTunes store or your Android store. You get me as your coach in your back pocket. The app is tremendous. You have access to all my writings, all my videos in an organized fashion. All my diets, my ketogenic diet, my cyclical ketogenic diet, my off-season diets up there, all the drug cycles, the advanced beginners, men, women. we answer everyone's questions in an open forum there. So you get to see everyone's questions and answers. It's a great learning experience. I do a Q&A video exclusively for the app members. So you get an extra Ask Dave every week only on the app for the app members. It's a tremendous teaching tool. And I think to have that in your back pocket where you're constantly learning and have the ability to ask me questions for $29 a month, it's a steal. And you know what? I want to thank all you guys out there because we have so many members and the support has been great. And that's what keeps inspiring me to do it month after month after month. And I will continue to do it as long as you guys support me. So thank you very much. A lot of people, they tell me, Dave, I can't afford coaching with you just because I don't have that extra money, but I support the app because I want you to keep doing what you're doing. So I appreciate that.
We take questions now from our Instagram, from our Facebook, as well as our primary source now, which is our YouTube community page. So if you go on the RxMuscle YouTube channel, go to posts, you'll see the Ask Dave graphic, and that's where you'll be able to ask questions. Dave, your thoughts on enclomephine for boosting test in a 100% natty guy? Will it help the same as testosterone?
Definitely not going to help the same as testosterone. That's like saying the growth hormone releasing peptides will help the same as taking actual growth hormone. Not going to happen. Will it give you a little boost? It could. Yeah. I mean, enclomephine basically is going to stimulate the pituitary gland to release more LH and FSH, which in turn can stimulate the testicles to produce more testosterone. And that's what its job is. How much testosterone your body cranks out in response to the enclomephine is a crapshoot. You don't really know, and that's why some people get a better response than others. For a natural, you might notice a little difference, and so that's something you can try, but it's not going to be anything comparable to taking a shot of testosterone. Even taking a very small HRT shot of testosterone will be a lot more effective. So it might be a good first line try. I would recommend, trying even my Testilize product because that reduces. A lot of people have enough testosterone production, but they convert it to other stuff. They convert it to estrogen. They convert it to DHT. If you take Testilize at 3 pills twice a day, it will block and blunt some of that DHT and estrogen production. Keep more of your testosterone as testosterone, plus boost your natural levels of testosterone. A lot of guys get a lot of benefits out of that, especially the natural athletes who want to just naturally boost testosterone. And then if you want to try to kick the enclomephine in on top of that, you might even notice even an additive effect to that. But if you want to get to that next jump, you got to go to the TRT, essentially.
We used to get this question a lot. It's been a while, but again, as we get new audiences, good to refresh certain topics. How do you do your rotational diet? How many days protein, carbs, and fat, and how many protein and fat?
Yeah, I usually start guys out on 3 days with carbs and 1 day without. So 3 days, they'll be like protein, vegetable, kind of like a carb, day. And then I'll do that 3 days in a row. And then I'll do a protein fat day, which would be my ketogenic diet, essentially. So they're getting like a really low carb day once every 4 days. And I see how the people respond to that. And as they respond, if they were losing weight and they're doing well, then, and because the protein, vegetable, carb days are not high carbs, they have carbs in them. And so there's no reason to start people immediately on a ketogenic diet unless they're really overweight and they want to lose weight at maximum speed. So I start like that, and then I might go to 2 days of, with carbs and 1 day not, and then 1 day and 1 day, and then it might switch to 2 days protein and fat and 1 day with carbs. So it varies according to how the person's responding to the diet. I like to change the food and the diet last as a variable. So I like to play with cardio and fat burners first. And then when those kind of hit a plateau, I realize, well, it must be diet related and why they're not losing weight. And then I change the diet. So I like to touch food last because it seems like the more food you can feed someone, the better they're going to look and the better they're going to recover. So I pull food last, but invariably, usually you have to pull food at some point.
This question is more about your practices during your prime, but I guess I'll expand it to your coaching practices. But diuretics during the course of a contest prep, how much, and I guess I'll add to that, what would you use as far as running during a contest prep? When would you taper up, taper down, heading into a show?
There's never a taper up, taper down because you never use diuretics. You only use them the last day. So if you're competing on a Saturday morning, I might give you half a diazide during the day on Friday and maybe a half at night. And that would be probably the most I would use. Have I used more on certain competitors? Yes, because some guys are just water buffaloes, But most people, that's adequate. Most people only need a half before bed. And some people need none. But most people need a little bit of something. I've given people like a quarter of a diazide, before bed. And those are usually the 37-25 diazides. Remember, diazide is 2 drugs. It's hydrochlorothiazide and triamterene. So a lot of times you get a generic prescription from the doctor. It won't say diazide. It'll say, it'll usually abbreviate HY, like hydro, and then they'll put, or hydrothia, and then they'll put like a slash, and you'll see triamterene or TRIAMT, and you won't know what that is. That's the 2 drugs in there, and it's usually 37-25. The triamterene dosage is really irrelevant. It's the hydrochlorothiazide that has a lot of kick. The hydrochlorothiazide makes your body lose sodium and potassium. The triamterene makes you retain potassium. So together they become a potassium-sparing diuretic that you only lose diazide with. It's the most predictable diuretic because if something goes wrong and you start cramping, the only thing that you can be deficient in would be sodium. So you add a little salt and you can correct it. Once again, anyone who uses diuretics more than one day before a show is unless they have to make like a weight class on a Thursday or something like that, is really only looking to screw themselves up. There's absolutely no reason to use it more than that. Once the show's over, you might need a half a diazide here and there, like the following week, if you start retaining an excessive amount of fluid because you're rebounding really bad. But other than that, that's it. You shouldn't be taking diuretics while you're training. Very dangerous. Dehydrated muscle tears real easy, and it's very catabolic. So do not take, even those herbal diuretics are very strong. Do not take those while you're prepping. The only time you want to take a diuretic is the last day, because if you take it prior to that, what happens is your body starts catching on to what's going on, and it starts releasing massive amounts of aldosterone. And aldosterone is a hormone that causes sodium reabsorption. We want aldosterone low in the body. We don't want it high, because then we're fighting our body's ability to lose water. So if you trick your body and just the last day give it some diuretics to flush out that extra sodium and water, it doesn't have time to respond in a negative way. I see guys, they start diazide like on a Thursday or a Wednesday. By Friday, they're peaked and they're ready to get on stage. And then on Saturday, they look terrible because they're either too flat or they get watery because their body's fighting the diazide. So don't tip your body off what you're doing. Save it for the last day.
All right. So you brought up After Hours. And by the way, all new episodes of After Hours on the channel from yesterday, because you're talking about Larry Pollock. So this question is from Sid Henry. He goes, why does Greg have, quote, shoulder pad looking shoulders? I'm not trolling. I'd like Dave to explain.
I don't know. Well, he has big shoulders anyway. He's very broad for a short guy. He always was. But I'm sure from all the injections he was doing in his arms and his shoulders, there's still stuff in there. There's scar tissue. There's God knows what's in there. I think that's why. I've never seen him really with a shirt on, to be honest with you, not in any recent memory. But I think he told me he has a lot of scar tissue still. I know his arms do. I'm assuming his shoulders probably have some too.
Let's go to here's one. Your most successful client who made it to the Olympia?
There was a lot of guys that did well. Obviously Juan Morel and Akeem when I worked with them, Evan Centopani when I worked with. But I think that I wasn't really working with Evan when he went to the Olympia, but I helped him turn pro, obviously. But I'm the most. I personally, and I've said this, I've gone on the record before. I think the X-Man Tony Freeman, when we were working together in 2008, Dexter won that Olympia. I thought Tony, I think he came in 5th that year, he could have won the Olympia. I absolutely, if you go back and look at the pictures and watch the videos, you could actually make a case for Tony winning that show. I don't think anyone would have complained because Jay was off. That's why Dexter beat him. But I didn't think Dexter was at his best. Dexter was good, but he wasn't at his best. I thought you could make a case for Tony winning that Olympia. No disrespect to Dexter, love him, and the guy's a legend. But Tony was just on. That was his show. He was the best he ever was. Posing was amazing. I mean, no one looked better in that standing relaxed from the front. His front double was deadly. His back poses were great. I don't know. I would have had him winning that Olympia, and once again, I've told him that before. And, he absolutely should have been higher than 5th place, but it just wasn't meant to be. There's just one of those things. But that was the most proud I had seen. I felt like, what? We did all the work. He busted his butt. This guy, people don't realize how many pro wins Tony had. I mean, we were winning shows like 2-3 a year. The regular shows. We would go to Texas. We would go the next week. We'd go someplace else, and he'd be winning like 2-3 in a row. So he was really on a tear for a while, and I really thought that the 08 was his best. And but sometimes it's just not meant to be. But go back and look at those pictures. You'll see what I'm talking about.
So obviously with YouTube, with social media now, if there is something very, gruesome or something very
I want to say one more thing. I got to add one more thing, Sid, because I blocked it out. Kevin Levrone obviously winning the 96 Arnold Classic when I helped him was probably the crowning jewel, but I didn't work with Kevin long term. I only worked with him for that one show, but he beat Flex Wheeler. So that was a very proud moment, but as far as Olympias go, I think Tony in 08.
Again, one of the byproducts of social media and YouTube now is we love shocking. We love to hear something just absolutely wild, something absolutely gruesome. Well, when it comes to bodybuilding and lifting in the gym, unfortunately, we've seen our fair share of gruesome gym mishaps, gruesome gym injuries. Do you recall a time that you saw one in person, and what would be the most gruesome gym injury that you saw in person that you can remember?
Yeah. I didn't see Jean-Pierre Fuchs, collapse under the weight, but I have to imagine that was probably the most gruesome that you can see when he tore both quads. But I did see, unfortunately, someone tear a pec in the gym, and I was like, they were on the bench press right behind me, and I actually heard the pop. That's how loud it was. It was like someone snapped, how like you ever see those things that they wrap around, like what is it called when they wrap things. They wrap packages and you have to cut them. They're like these plastic. I forget what they're called. It sounded like someone
those plastic ribbon thingies. Yeah.
They ripped it apart and it was the loudest snap I had ever heard. I'm like, what the hell was that? It almost sounded like a gunshot. Turned around and the guy was in a tank top, and you can just see the pec completely rolled up. It hadn't even had time to turn red or bleed. It's just the pec just was not there. It just was gone. It was like rolled, and. I think the person was in shock because they really weren't screaming or anything like that, in pain, but they were holding their chest, and it was just, it's not a nice thing to see, because it can happen to any one of us. And this is when I was kind of in my prime and I was at my biggest, and I'm like, it scares the crap out of you, because that's a career-ending injury, for most people. And this person wasn't going to the Olympia or anything like that, but it's kind of sucked for him. And obviously he got the pec repair. He was back in the gym, 6 months later. But it was a gruesome injury. It's not the luck. Knock on wood. Luckily, I never tore anything in the gym, severely like that. I obviously had the quad tear when I slipped on the staircase in India, but I never tore a muscle in the gym while I was in the process of competing. You know what I mean? During my heyday, which I thank God for, because that's something you just don't want to do and go through.
Thoughts on building muscle? Again, keto. We haven't gotten a keto question in quite some time. Thoughts on building muscle on keto? Possible, but carbs has to be better for high intensity cardio and lifting, right? So, building muscle and recovering while on a keto diet.
You got to remember, carbs are used for fuel, right? And we know that on a ketogenic diet, fats get used for fuel, right? Especially for the brain. Here's the problem with doing a ketogenic diet in an off-season scenario where you're trying to build muscle. You don't want to use the protein and fat that you're eating in your diet for energy when you're trying to grow. You want to use that for building and repairing muscle. So that's why they say that you've probably heard the term the carb spare muscle or carb spare protein, because when you eat carbohydrates, your body uses the carbs as fuel when you're training. And it can then take the protein that you're ingesting and the fats that you're ingesting and use that to repair muscle at maximal rates. If you're on a very low carb diet, okay, yes, there's still some glycogen being produced indirectly from amino acids, and you still have something in the muscles to use. But if you run out, okay, of carbs, okay, in the muscle, because you do have low glycogen stores, your body is going to convert some of that protein into glucose to use for fuel. So now you might not have enough protein present, okay, for repairing muscle tissue at maximal rates. So you're kind of limiting your body's ability to grow. So what I recommend that guys do is don't do a ketogenic diet while you're in the off season. Just do a low carb diet. So you don't have to eat, 600 grams of carbs to put on muscle. You might only need 150 grams of carbs. You might need 100 grams of carbs a day, but give your body some carbs to spare the muscle, to spare the protein and the fat for building and repairing muscle. So you don't need to go to extremes. And look, I'm the ketogenic diet guy. If anything, I'm going to tell you stay on a keto diet all the time. But I'm not going to do that because I know that it's not going to serve you well in an off-season scenario where you're trying to put muscle on. If you're just trying to maintain a certain look and stay lean all the time, that's a different story. But for guys that are trying to actively put muscle on that just don't want to get fat, just don't eat as many carbs. You can still go low carb and still grow, but you should have some carbs.
Mechanistically, I guess that's the new word of the day. How do you differentiate between glycogen depletion induced fatigue and quote central fatigue when determining if a client should take a deload week or just increase intra-workout carb intake?
Look, if you're in an off-season scenario where you're eating adequate amounts of carbohydrates, where you're not in a restricted state like when you're dieting for a competition. Because when you're dieting for a competition, you're going to have shitty days and you're going to have great days. And the shitty days suck, and I never cheated on my diet other than on my prescribed cheat days, but cheat meals. But there was a point once in the diet where I was so down and I was almost like literally depressed. I said basically F it. I went to a diner and I had like a turkey sandwich or something like that with some French fries or something like that. I was like, that's it. I'm canceling the show, that kind of thing, because I never cheated. And you know what? I went back after the meal, and I remember I was living in the Bronx at the time. I went back to my apartment. I fell asleep for an hour and a half. I woke up. I felt like $1 million. And all of a sudden, everything was erased. The next day, I had a great workout in the gym. I actually lost 2 pounds, and I was back on track. So sometimes you just need a little bit of a reset, and there's nothing wrong with that. But in an off-season scenario, if you're eating, adequate amounts of food and you're not like in a restricted state, and you feel run down and you feel like I don't even want to go to the gym, and there's nothing, you're not sick or anything like that, you probably can use a day or two off. Might need maybe you're training too hard, too many days in a row, and you just need that extra little time off. That's understandable. Unfortunately, a lot of people are just lazy, and so they will look for any excuse. They like the term deload. I'm going to take a deload week because you know what? I just don't feel like going to the gym. Well, that's not a good reason. Are you and then I ask these people questions. I'm like, are you eating all your meals every day? Well, I'm getting 4 of the meals in. I said, you're supposed to be eating 6. They're like, yeah, I'm not that hungry. And, I haven't been busy. Well, maybe if you ate all your meals, you'd have enough energy to want to go to the gym and train. So you have to kind of diagnose what's going on before just saying, yeah, take a week off from the gym. I never took a week off from the gym I would take an extra day or 2 here and there, but I never took a full week off. So I don't even know what that means. So when people tell me that, I have to believe a lot of times that they're looking for an excuse not to go to the gym, or maybe they're just not hitting all their marks as far as food and supplementation goes in their diet. So you got to differentiate between people that are lazy versus people that legitimately need an extra day or 2 off.
Question about someone that's not a bodybuilder, someone that's not necessarily, quote, overly active. Do they still need to take 10 v-mineralyze a day? I'm trying to convince someone to switch from their 1 a day centrum. And
Right.
I think, and he says maybe hearing from you would better convince them. I think that's one of the arguments that you've been making for a very long time, but I think this is a good question because I think your advice maybe resonates a lot more with the bodybuilder or the active athlete. So if you want to spread the message maybe to those that are not the quote unquote serious athlete, why v-mineralize is beneficial for them.
Right. Well, first of all, I know people are driving me crazy, and I with good reason, because we're out of v-mineralize. it's one of our number one selling products because no one makes a more complete multivitamin, multimineral, trace metal, antioxidant, polyphenolic, fruit and vegetable extract product on the market. It's very complete. But I wanted to make it more complete. I wanted to update it, and I have updated it. And the new version will be out any day now. Okay, they're telling me the end of the month, so we're almost there at this point. It was supposed to be the beginning of the month, but you know how things go. Sometimes they don't work out the way they're supposed to work out. I also didn't think we would run out of the old one because we went through like 5,000 bottles in the last 3 months, through Christmas and everything like that. Everyone was buying it with all the sales. So we blew through a lot of bottles a lot faster than I expected and that I predicted. So we ran out, but we will have the new version. I upped the dose of vitamin D3 in there because we used to have 2,000 IUs. Now we have 5, which is exactly what most people need per day. I also added vitamin K2, which most vitamins don't have in there, at an effective dosage, which we know K2 directs calcium away from the blood vessels and into the bones and into the muscles where they need to be used. Okay. Whereas if you don't have enough K2, sometimes you can lay down, calcium in your blood vessel walls, and that's not good because it stiffens those walls, especially in the coronary arteries. Also, we added methylated folic acid. Okay. So we always had methylated cobalamin, which is methylated vitamin B12, which is the activated version. We didn't have the folic acid version of methylated folic acid. And we know a lot of people, myself included, cannot methylate folic acid. It's a gene defect. And there's a lot of side effects that go along with that and things that you can't do cognitively and even workout wise if you don't have methylated or activated folic acid in your body. So we've added methylated folate in there, and this has now made v-mineralyze the most complete multivitamin on the market. And the dosage of 5 pills twice a day is what the athlete should take, okay? Because it gives you all the right amounts of calcium, magnesium, vitamin C. There's so many things in there that you need to get the right dosage. You can't jam it into one pill. If you're taking one a day vitamin, you might as well throw it in the garbage. You're wasting your money. You're getting nothing. You're getting like a couple of grains of everything just so they can say that it's in there, but there's no effective dose of anything in there. It would be like a person on the desert island who has no water to drink because everything's salt water, and you give them like a thimble worth of water every day. It's not going to keep them alive. It might make their tongue wet, but it's not going to keep them alive. So you need the 5 pills twice a day. Now, if you don't work out at all and your grandmother is looking to take a good multivitamin, she can probably get away with 2 or 3 pills twice a day. Yeah, yes, I can. That's better than nothing because I know my dad. My dad would never swallow 5 pills twice a day just because it's too much work for him to do that. So if I tell him take 3 pills twice a day, he'd be more likely to do that because it's like you have to sometimes compromise with your parents. Like it's like, all right, I want you to take 5 a day, but I'll tell you what, if you do 3 a day, will you do it? Yeah, I'll do 3 twice a day. Okay, great. Take the 3 pills twice a day. But if you're working out, you definitely want to hit whether you're a man or a woman, you want to hit the 5 pills twice a day.
Take one more question, and this one's about casein. Thoughts on casein protein before bed? I feel like casein was talked about a lot more, say, a decade ago, but that conversation has since faded.
Here's the reality of the protein market. Okay, whey isolate is insanely expensive. If any of you guys seen the price changes in isolate, and let me tell you something, I held off raising the price on isolate so long that I actually realized I was actually almost losing money on selling the product. So I had to increase the price a few months back, or maybe 6 months ago. Whey protein is insanely expensive. And I've talked about this with Rich Gaspari too on his podcast. He sells egg protein. Egg protein is actually more expensive than whey right now. So the two best proteins on the market are the most expensive. And so what these companies are trying to do is constantly find something that's cheaper that they can make money on. So they sell like this collagen protein, which is basically garbage. It's digested tendons and ligaments. Okay. They sell pea protein, right? We know vegan protein is devoid of branched chain amino acids. Not good for bodybuilders, obviously. And casein was being sold for a while because it was much cheaper than whey. But it's not that cheap anymore. So you don't really see that much casein anymore. Now, whey is infinitely better than casein. but casein's pretty good too. Obviously, it's an animal source of protein. We put some casein, a little bit of it, in ProtoLyze, our protein pudding. I don't know if any of you guys have tried the ProtoLyze. It's absolutely delicious. We have vanilla chocolate. It's an instant pudding. You basically put a scoop in there. It's 30 grams of protein. You add 2 ounces of water and you mix it. And you have instant pudding. It's a great snack at night, especially if you don't want to just do a shake and you want to do something that you can actually sit there and eat in front of your TV. You know, a lot of guys will use a scoop and a half so they get 45 grams of protein out of it, or 45 grams of protein out of it, or they'll do even more. They'll do 2 scoops. You know, that's fine too. The point is we put a little casein there because it thickens up the, it helps you make the pudding better. It gives it a little more viscosity. And it kind of, because casein is delayed in the sense that it doesn't absorb as quickly as whey, we call it like a time release protein. So casein can kind of add a time release aspect to the shake that you're having, or the pudding in that case that you're having. Would I use a straight casein at night? Probably not, because quality wise, it's not as good as whey. But a blend of casein and whey isolate is a good mixture, and that's why we did it with the ProtoLyze. Once again, I don't cut corners. My products are a little more expensive than everyone else's, but I want to put out the best quality products. Other companies, their goal is to try to get the cost of the product down so they can increase their profit margin. And that's fine if that's their business model. But understand that's why you're going to see all kinds of wacky, winky products out there. Even this clear protein is a gimmick, because it's basically whey isolate that they've subjected to heavy acidic acids and digestive enzymes to basically strip the protein down to nothing so that it dissolves and turns clear in water. The problem is that you've ruined all the immunoglobulins and all the immune system boosting, ingredients in the whey, and you've just kind of broken down and destroyed the integrity of the protein. So yeah, mix is nicer, but the protein's not as good for you. But it's a gimmick. It's a sales gimmick. So at the end of the day, you guys do what you want, but a high quality whey isolate, we make the highest whey isolate, the highest yield whey isolate on the market. It's 28 grams of protein per 33 gram serving size. We have the best flavors. It mixes the best because there's no added ingredients in there. There's no fillers and stuff like that. And once you use isolized, you're not going to use anything else. And I'm comfortable with that. But I also am comfortable with the fact that there are other companies that have cheaper products that maybe people are more apt to buy. That's fine. If you want the best, you use ours. If you want a cheaper product, there's other options out there. But understand that a straight casein protein is going to be a sales gimmick that they're going to tell you it's a time release protein to sell you it because it's a cheaper version of whey. So you're better off going with a blend.
That's going to do for this episode of Ask Dave. Reminder, right now on the channel, all new episode of the After Hours podcast, as well as Heavy Muscle Radio with Dave Palumbo and Chris Aceto. If you haven't already done so, subscribe below, hit the notification bell. You're not going to miss any of this show or any other segments that we have on this channel. And of course, our Arnold Classic coverage begins very shortly with the Arnold Classic about 6.5 weeks away from today, the beginning of the IFBB Pro League schedule. For Dave Palumbo, I'm Sadiq Faruqi. We'll see you next time.